The problem does not always appear on the leaf. A salad can look clean, fresh, and safe, but some parasites leave no smell, no color, and no visible warning. The story can begin long before the food reaches your plate.
It might begin in the water used for irrigation, quietly mingling with the crops we rely on every single day. Or, it could happen during the handling, harvesting, or transport of the produce itself, essentially an invisible passenger hitching a ride on our healthiest foods. And because of how slowly this specific biological timeline works, by the time the timing aligns for an outbreak to even be noticed, the symptoms have usually already taken hold, quietly disguising themselves as just an ordinary stomach bug. Right now, a major foodborne illness is spreading across the United States, and as you can see, the source is completely unknown. Tracing the origin of this kind of invisible contamination is highly complex. Officials are currently having to work backward through a massive, sprawling supply chain just to find out where it all began.
Section 1. The postcard from the farm. Understanding the journey.
To truly grasp how an outbreak like this actually functions, think of fresh produce as a postcard from a really long journey. The plate on your dining table, that's just the final stop. The real story includes water, soil, harvesting, washing, packaging, transport, and storage. And somewhere along that intricate journey, a microscopic threat gets introduced. The specific pathogen driving this current investigation is called Cyclospora cayetanensis. Now say that name and even seasoned doctors and nurses might pause. It's a single-cell microscopic parasite, kind of a distant cousin of the bug that caused that famous Milwaukee water supply shutdown back in the 1990s. And it enters the human body strictly through consuming contaminated food or water. But there's a really unique biological mechanism at play here. When someone is infected, what they shed in their fresh stool is actually not yet infectious. In order to make someone else sick, the parasite has to sit out in the environment, like in soil, on produce, or in water, for roughly 1 to 2 weeks to spoilate or ripen. And this actually has a beautifully reassuring consequence for us. This parasite essentially cannot spread directly from person to person. So if you're caring for a loved one who has it, you won't catch it just by being in the same house or cleaning up after them.
Section 2. The untraced outbreak, what the data shows. As of the data we're looking at in our source material, the CDC has confirmed 843 domestically acquired cases across 31 states. Around 10% of these confirmed cases have actually required hospitalization, so that's 86 people. To give you some responsible, useful context here, though, there have been 0 reported deaths, thankfully. However, public health officials do note that these case counts often lag real life by about 6 weeks, and in places like Michigan, the state is seeing roughly 30 times their normal annual caseload.
This brilliantly illustrates the investigative challenge we're facing. In a typical outbreak, officials can usually point quickly to a specific food. But look at the current outbreak status here. No common food has been identified, and the source is officially unknown. On the other hand, if we look at the list of foods historically linked to Cyclospora, we see things like raspberries, basil, cilantro, bagged salad mixes, snow peas, blackberries, and leafy greens. Notice a distinct pattern there? Every single item on that historical list is something we eat raw.
So why is it so difficult to trace the source this time around? Well, our sources point to some recent systemic shifts. In 2025, changes to the CDC's foodborne surveillance network actually made Cyclospora reporting optional, alongside reported reductions in federal food safety staffing and delays to traceability rules. While experts certainly debate the direct impact of all this, the consensus really aligns with this quote: tracking fewer pathogens and tracing food more slowly means outbreaks can just be spotted later or counted less thoroughly.
Section 3. The timeline of an invisible infection.
The absolutely crucial point here is separating this from your standard stomach bug. Bacterial food poisoning tends to hit you within hours and burns out pretty fast. Cyclospora, on the other hand, is a slow and patient villain. It can take up to a full week after eating contaminated food before symptoms, things like explosive watery diarrhea, severe fatigue, and a total loss of appetite, even begin. And it doesn't just pass in a day. It can drag on for weeks in this maddening, relapsing, and remitting pattern. You'll think you're better, and then it comes roaring right back.
Now, for young, healthy people, it's basically just a miserable few weeks. But for older adults, the frail, or the immunocompromised, the danger scales up dramatically. The primary hazard isn't actually just the parasite itself. It's the severe dehydration from prolonged fluid loss. This kind of dehydration spirals really quickly into electrolyte imbalances, acute kidney injury, dizziness, and dangerous falls. I mean, think about it. A parasite in fresh food can ultimately lead to a broken hip and a hospital admission for a vulnerable adult.
Section 4. Medical facts and laboratory hurdles.
Whenever something like this happens, the internet floods with suggestions for natural parasite cleanses, things like wormwood, oregano oil, or papaya seeds. Let's look at the evidence neutrally here. There are 0 published human studies proving any of these herbal remedies treat Cyclospora in humans. While some herbs show activity in test tubes or against different parasites, substituting a proven medical treatment for an unproven cleanse can dangerously delay care. On the other hand, there is a decades-old, inexpensive, and highly proven antibiotic treatment, most commonly known as Bactrim, that generally works within days.
But to get that treatment, you obviously need an accurate diagnosis, and Cyclospora is notoriously good at slipping past standard laboratory tests. Because it sheds intermittently, routine stool samples frequently miss it entirely. So, if you or a loved one are experiencing these specific, prolonged symptoms, we highly recommend using this exact phrase with your doctor. Given the current Cyclospora outbreak, can we specifically test for Cyclospora using a modified acid-fast stain or a stool PCR panel? Simply requesting this specific test can honestly save weeks of dangerous dehydration.
Section 5. Practical risk reduction in the kitchen.
I have to demystify a very comfortable myth right here. Many of us think, oh, I'll just wash my produce really well and I'm fine. Now, washing reduces risk, absolutely, and you should always wash your food, but it does not reliably remove this specific parasite, Cyclospora. Clings tightly to the microscopic crevices of bumpy fruit and leafy greens. Interestingly enough, it's also highly resistant to standard chlorine sanitizers, so your produce wash is helpful for sure, but it is not completely protective.
So what practical steps can we actually take to protect our families? First, try to cook your leafy greens and herbs whenever possible, because heat reliably kills the parasite. Second, if you are eating fresh lettuce during an active outbreak, favor whole heads over pre-washed bagged mixes, and just discard the outer 2 or 3 leaves. And third, if symptoms do appear, especially in older adults, push fluids and electrolytes immediately at the very first sign of illness to prevent that dangerous dehydration spiral.
Which brings us to a crucial final thought for this explainer. The issue isn't that fresh food is inherently dangerous. Fresh produce is a vital cornerstone of our health. The real issue is that some foodborne risks are entirely invisible, relying on a vast interconnected network of water, soil, and transport. As our food supply chain grows more and more complex, how do we best balance the vital health benefits of fresh produce with the invisible risks of its journey? Well, it starts right here, by staying informed, asking your doctor the right questions, and understanding the incredible journey your food took long before it ever reached your plate.